Microsoft Excel is known for having extremely many functions and features. One of its many advantages is the possibility to automate tasks that you would normally have to repeat manually. Historically, automation in Excel was done through macros. They are still available and allow you to automate pretty much every aspect of Excel and even things beyond Excel. However, the technology behind them is a bit dated and there are quite many security concerns related to them, so since a few years back Microsoft has started working on an alternative called Office Scripts. There are quite some differences in how both technologies work. In this video we will focus on the basic of macros. Be sure to check our other videos to learn more about macros and Office Scripts. When you open Excel after it has been installed, you will not be able to find macros in the menu. This option is by default hidden, so in order to access macro-related functionalities from the menu, you will have to enable it first. To do so, go to File, Options, and click on Customize ribbon. In this dialog, you can define how your menus should look like. In the pane to the right, you can see that the developer option is unticked. If you mark it and click OK, you will see a new menu appear in Excel. Before we start working with macros, it is important to set proper security around this. Macros are very powerful, but they can also be very dangerous. Quite a lot of computer viruses have been spread just through macros in Excel or Word. In order to set proper security level, go again to File, Options and click on Trust Center, and then click on Trust Center Settings button. In the dialog that shows, go to Macro Settings. By default, Microsoft suggests to disable VBA macros with notification, and this is usually the best option to pick if you intend on working with macros. Whenever you open a file with macros, Excel will disable them but will notify you about it, and you will be able to decide whether you want to allow macros in the file to run. Please do it only if you trust the file. Don't pick the Enable VBA macros option. Microsoft themselves say that this is not recommended, and this is indeed true. By choosing this option, you would expose yourself to malicious actors that could infect your computer with a simple macro. When you have set proper security level, you can start working with macros. When you click on the developer menu, you will see various buttons allowing you to operate with macros. We will skip the Visual Basic button for now and focus on the other options in the code section. The Macros button will allow you to see all macros that are available. In the beginning, the list will be empty. The Macros In drop-down list allows you to select where Excel should look for macros. The contents of this list will change depending on what files you have open and also how you have saved your macros. We will get back here later. The Macro Security button brings you to the same place in options that we accessed through the Trust Center. So here you have an alternative way of reaching the place where you can adjust macro security settings. Since we do not have any macros yet, we need to create one. There are basically two ways of creating macros: writing code, that option is available behind the Visual Basic button that we skip for now, and recording macros. To record a macro, click on Record Macro button. This will open a new dialog asking you to define some details for your macro. First, the name. Please pick a name that will be descriptive so that you know what your macro does. You will also not be able to use spaces and some other special characters in the name, so an option is to use capital letters or underscores to separate words. The shortcut key allows you to define a key combination, Control and a key, that will allow you to run your macro just on a press of these two buttons. This is potentially a very useful functionality, but has to be used with caution, because if you pick a key combination that normally does something else, for instance Ctrl+C to copy something to clipboard, then this original assignment will stop working and instead your macro will be executed, so a piece of advice is to skip this for now. The next option will allow you to decide where you want to save your macro for future use. The default choice is to store the macro in this workbook, and this is usually the best option. You can also decide to store it in a new workbook or in the Personal Macro workbook. Personal Macro workbook is a special workbook that is stored on your hard drive and is opened by Excel in the background each time you open Excel. So if the macro you create is something that you intend on using with multiple workbooks, then a good choice is to store it in the Personal Macro workbook, because it will be available for you regardless of the file you open. But if your macro is needed only for the current workbook, then a good choice is to save it in that workbook. Additionally, if you intend on sharing the workbook with others, then you will have to save the macro in the workbook because others will not be able to access your personal macro workbook. A very good option is to always add a description of what your macro does. This field is optional, so you do not have to fill it in, but you will see after a while that even if you use the most descriptive names for your macros, you may find it difficult to remember what each macro does, so adding a short description will make your life easier in the future. When you enter all details and click on OK, Excel will start recording what you do. You will also see that the Record Macro button has now changed to Stop Recording. Also in the bottom of the screen you will see a Stop Recording icon and a notion that the macro is being recorded. When Excel records your macro, it does not record your mouse movements, it only records changes to cells and activation of various functions, also through mouse clicks. In this example, we assume the following scenario. Let's say that you every week get a text file with some data. Your task is to format the data as a table, create a pivot table out of it, and add a chart. Since you get this file every week, you do the same things with it, so it is a good idea to automate it. Since this is a task we will be doing with different files, it is also a good idea to save this macro in the personal macro workbook. We call this macro adjust data create pivot. In this particular case, we assume that we have already opened the right file we want to work with. Let's start recording our macro. What we simply have to do is to perform all the steps we want. Select the data, convert to table, create pivot table, insert chart. When we are ready with recording our steps, we just have to click on Stop Recording. Now, assuming we have a new text file, we do not have to repeat all steps. It is enough for us to go to Developer Macros or press Alt F8 and pick our macro from the list and click on Run, and voila! Excel does all the steps for us. If you don't see your macro on the list, then check that you have the right scope to search for macros. For instance, if it should be searched in the current workbook or if it is in the personal macro workbook. This is just the first step in the introduction to macros in Microsoft Excel. We will show more on how to work with Excel macros in our future material. Be sure to check our other videos to learn more about various Office applications.